Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and a look at the Marseille sweater from PetiteKnit. So I had previously done the Marseille sweater holding two yarns together at the same time to get a sort of melange look, but of course I wanted to do the more classic sort of like a French striped approach as well. I really loved PetiteKnit's color choices, but I couldn't justify the cost of the Sandus yarn. So I went ahead and still picked up sort of like a nicer to me yarn, which is the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. The two colors I've chosen are Marzipan and Navy. I was hoping that marzipan would be a little bit more on the warmer side, like an almond, but it is sort of a muted grayish, a little bit more gray toned than I was expecting for something like marzipan. But I do quite like how it turned out, so I'm not too upset about it. One thing that I am a little bit upset about is just that I found the yarn requirements to be grossly overestimated in the pattern. Because this is coming from, I believe it's Copenhagen, there were limits on like how many balls I could get for a certain shipping price. And so if I went over that, the shipping just went astronomical. So I actually ended up taking 3 or 4 balls of like cotton merino out of my cart that I would have been able to make tank top or something with, because I was trying to get under that ball threshold. And it turns out I didn't need anywhere near as much yarn as they told me to buy. So they told me to buy 11 skeins of the marzipan. I ended up using 9, and they told me to buy 3 skeins of the navy, and I ended up using just over 1. So I probably still needed 2, but did not need 3. So I have a lot of this heavy merino left over. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with it. Maybe I can make Tony a hat or something like that. But like I said, that would have freed up a couple of balls in my package where I could have, purchased yarn for a completely different sweater. So that was a little bit frustrating to me. Even though the last time I made this pattern, I said I probably wouldn't bother with the provisional cast on, I went ahead and did the provisional cast on again anyway. I do think it looks pretty nice in this sweater. There's a very repeated number of those short rows in there, so you do see the line even though it's not like a legitimate seam. This pattern also has some short row shaping at the top of the sleeve as well, so you can sort of see that this section here is triangle shaped because there are more rows on this side than there are on this side. So one thing is that my mom complained that the stripe didn't continue across the arm on the upper end. But of course, because this is a drop shoulder design, in order to get the stripe to come across the sleeve here, that means it actually would have to be vertical and butt up with this existing stripe at a 90-degree angle, which would be really, really challenging to do. The sweater does say that you're supposed to knit 4 stripes, but when I looked at it on myself, and I decided that I didn't like when the ribbing started immediately after a navy stripe. So it meant that I needed to have a wide swatch that's equal width of the marzipan after the navy stripe before I started the knitting, which meant that if I was going to go ahead and do another navy stripe, it would add, an additional 3 or 4 inches onto it. And at this point, I felt like it was long enough for my tastes. My waist is probably up here, so it is longer than my waist. Sort of hits me at mid hip height, right at my pelvic bone. I do think it's really oversized. I chose the size medium, which is the size that I should be using for my measurements. It's huge. I think when I blocked it, it ended up being like 50 inches wide. So it's big. It didn't grow that much in my swatch, and I think that's just because it's this heavy merino, as the name implies, is kind of heavy. And so the extra weight of the full amount of the sweater really stretched out those stitches more than just my tiny little blocking swatch did. So that was a little bit disappointing that it ended up being even bigger than I thought it was going to be. But I kind of like that sort of oversized look. It feels very like I'm on a boat or I'm in France or something like that, just carefree and easy. I struggled a bit with the collar. So the first one I made, I felt like the collar was too bulky being a folded over collar. So I had decided that I wasn't going to do a folded over collar on the sweater. So I just did 10 rows of ribbing, 1 by 1 ribbing, and then bound off an Italian. which I liked how it looked, but once I put it on, I felt like the pickup around the neck was too much stitches if you were going to do that sort of collar, because it didn't like sit flat against the body. It sort of like stuck out and I couldn't get it to lay flat. So I ended up undoing that entire sewn bind off around the neckline, which was, it hurt my soul, but I did it. And then continued on doing another, 10 or 11 more rows of 1 by 1 before folding it in half and doing it down. So the folding collar, I still think looks a little bit bulky. I did try running some elastic in this, but I felt like that it almost tightened it up too much around my neck. So I ended up taking the elastic out, because as I wore it, this neckline felt like it wanted to relax and ease out a little bit. So I think it looks a lot better now than when I first finished it, just because it was a little too big and too close to my neck when I first finished it. And now it's sort of relaxed. I do love that this pattern has really long, deep ribbing on the sleeves and the bottom of the sweater. I hate doing long sections of ribbing, but I love how it looks. So it's one detail that like I don't love doing, but it's so worth it. And I think the finished garment looks really nice because of that extra detail. I hope you've enjoyed my look at the Marseille sweater from PetiteKnit. I'll see you next time. Take care.